I have an image here of a bonsai tree, a photograph that I took at the Chicago Botanic Gardens. And it's a wonderful subject to draw because learning to draw a tree is a great thing to do, but with a bonsai tree, the beautiful design of a tree is already figured out by the bonsai artist. So that makes it even more fun to draw. And this works really well either in colored pencil. I have 3 colors I'm working with here. I have a sort of grass green, I have a really dark green, a yellowish green, and then a really dark brown for the trunk part. And as I said, it works equally as well with graphite. This drawing an image like this also gives us an opportunity to review some of the basic concepts we've been talking about. It's a great exercise in angles, in searching out the main angle of this trunk and the angles of the branches which slant down, which is not what we usually think of in a tree. It's also a good observation of planes. We talked about round objects last time. This is a cylinder instead of a ball, but the same principle applies. The light is coming from this direction, so the dark part of the trunk will be over here, and leaving that part light will give the trunk a sense of being round. This is also another plane. We have, and again, it's rounded, but it's got this short cylindrical shape. The light coming from here, and so the dark part of this pot is over here, and leaving this side light gives it its roundness. We've also been talking about cast shadows and core shadows. So the core shadow on this tree, the core shadow is what's on the object, is on this side, and again on the pot, the core shadow of this pot is on this side. And then the cast shadow is on the table, and as all shadows, it's darkest close to the object, and it gets a little bit lighter as it goes out. This is quite subtle, but it's still there, and I would even make it even more subtle and probably not even put a sharp edge there. I would just sort of let it feather out. Again, the cast shadow of the branch and the trunk and the branches, it's quite dark along here, and as it comes out here, it gets softer or less distinct and lighter. And we'll add another concept that's really helps make a piece of art look interesting, and that's what we can call either not drawing everything, or as many artists like to say, lost and found edges. And this would apply to drawing something like the needles on this tree, which we know there are individual needles, and we know that, but if we draw that, we take some of the mystery out, and it would look very static, very coloring bookish, which there's nothing wrong with coloring books, but if that's not the look you're going for, then drawing the major imagery that you see and leaving the rest for the viewer to, the viewer's eye to fill in, is what can make a drawing very interesting. So we would start this drawing, I would start this drawing, I should say, observing the major angle of that trunk first, and I'm going to decide to put my pot over here. And again, be careful of that. The top of that pot is an ellipse, not a circle. We know front on it would look like a circle, but tipped as it is, it's an ellipse. And then to get that angle, I'm just going to do this and then slide my pencil over, and that gives my, see if you can see that. And I'm just going to do some little tick marks along the way just to observe that angle and give me a guide. And then maybe indicate that little bend there, because I like that a lot. So I'll follow this imagery, but I'm not going to be tied to it. I want to borrow from it because it's so beautiful, but if it isn't exactly the way these branches fit together, I'm not going to worry about that. So I put those little bends in, because they're kind of a guide as to where the boughs come out. So, and I'm noticing that the trunk is bigger down at the bottom. That's true of many trees. It's got its root system here. So there's these two boughs that come out and they slant down. So I want to make sure I get that. And then up here at that little crook is another bough that comes out. So I'm just going very lightly because I may want to adjust some of these shapes and erase or just draw them a little bit differently. Here's one I did earlier. I got the main idea of the trunk down and I started on some of the boughs, and I didn't even finish off the trunk before I started on the needles. I can finish the trunk later. I've got enough in that I'm convinced I'm headed in the right direction here. So to get the needles, and I'm going to work larger than the image here just so we can see it. So I would start with, for instance, this shape of these needles is kind of a rectangle. So I'm going to indicate the part of the branch here that kind of comes and goes. Like here it's very distinct, here it kind of disappears, it peeks out from those needles, and that's what makes it so mysterious and interesting. So again, working upsize a little bit here so we can see it. This is quite defined, so I'm going to put that in fairly strongly. And then I'm just going to make little tick marks, and I'm just going to put in the shape that that whole set of needles makes. I'm going very lightly because I don't want to indicate every needle. I just want to get that basic shape in there. So I'm doing more of a block of color. So that's close enough for me. Then I'm going to go in, and this gets lighter up in here. So I'm going to, again, I'm just putting in blocks of color. And then I'm noticing that it is darker. It's denser down here where these needles are, so it's darker. There's more light coming through the needles up here, but right close to the branch there, they're quite dark. So I'm just going to indicate that, and I think I even want to go in with a little bit of this brown to indicate that denseness of those needles. And then where the bough kind of peeks out there, I'm just going to just leave that little light space right there. And then I'll do maybe just a few sweeps up here of these needles. And what I don't draw in, the eye will fill in. And I don't even need to, this almost disappears, the needle there. We know it's connected to the branch, but all I'm seeing is the darker areas on the ends. So that's all I'm going to draw. And so I would work my way around then, and then go back and look where I might want to do it more closely. So that's how that is going. And then if I were doing it with graphite, this is one I started earlier, And again, I was just doing tone up in there and then putting in a few needles. And I could even go in and take out some of that tone if I wanted to, if I felt like I got too much needle stuff going on there. And go back in and darken it where it seems to make sense.